So tell me, what got you interested in the film and the subject matter? I mean, you were, what, 6 or 7 when the Iran hostage
Yeah,
crisis
I
happened?
didn't know very much about the. I mean, I did later, but I don't remember it. At the time, I got really interested in the script because I was a Middle Eastern Studies major in college, so there was an aspect of the area that I thought was really interesting anyway. And then when I read the script, it had these kind of three distinct tones. It has spy story, a real comedy, and a thriller. And I thought that was a challenge as a director to try to integrate those things and make them all feel like they're part of the same movie. And that if I was able to do that, it might be something special and interesting.
And were you worried that the story itself is so fantastical that people might not believe it?
I was very worried because if it weren't true, it would be the worst plot in the world for a movie because it would be completely absurd.
I mean, it's farcical, isn't it?
It is, and I needed to keep reinforcing, I felt like I did anyway, to the audience that it was true, that it was real. And there's a danger in that. Some people may felt like, oh, you're pushing too hard. I felt like it was better to err on the side of helping to continue to help the audience understand that this was something that really took place, because then they'd be more rooted in the story, and even till the end, showing photographs of the real people and the actors side by side, and the voiceover from President Carter, who says, in effect, I thought having the President of the United States, when this thing took place, say this is an actual event, and talking about it a little bit, was really, really powerful and helped to cement in the audience's mind this was true. The flip side of that is that you run the risk of looking like it's a referendum on the Carter presidency, which I didn't want. I didn't want to politicize the movie, whether domestic or internationally, but I thought that was worth running the risk.
There are those lessons, aren't there, that you could draw from the film in terms of policy today. I mean, the support, for example, for the Shah's repressive regime helped create the conditions, didn't it, for the hostage crisis? Is there a sense in which there's a parallel with support for, say, Hosni Mubarak's regime? Is it all playing out?
Well, that's exactly one of the things that I thought about it, is, as you say, the sort of Western optics of the Shah and his regime were palatable to us, and he was our friend, and so we sort of looked past, and it was the U.S. and Britain and other countries, we looked past some of the corruption and the repression in exactly the same way that we were willing to look past the corruption and repression of Mubarak because of his relationship to Israel, his sort of pro-Western stance, his sort of vaguely secular regime. And so the connection with Mubarak, I think, also conjures up thematically the Arab Spring, even the Green Revolution, and it indirectly, which I think is the best way, asks the question of, how wise is it to be in the business of being in business with foreign governments?
Are you surprised that 30 years on, more than 30 years on, the US seemed to have learned very little in a way from this whole episode?
I find it very distressing, that I'm able to look at research material, film from 30 plus years ago that's taken from the Iranian embassy in Iran, and it looks just like what we see on the news now. I mean, that really stunned me, and it did make me very sad, because I've gotten really invested in the story and this whole relationship, to think that history just is repeating itself, and that we appear to have, if not necessarily learned nothing, we haven't learned to better navigate these relationships, and we pay the price for it.
And the opening sequence, I mean, you can't help thinking of the storming of the consulate in Benghazi, can you?
I know. I thought that there would be some similarities to as I said, the Arab Spring, but I had no idea that these events in Benghazi that would so closely mirror the events of Iran in 1979, 1980 would take place. In particular. And one of the things that I'm really glad we did in this movie, particularly in light of Benghazi, is that it is really a tribute to people in the Foreign Service who put themselves in great jeopardy by serving overseas, oftentimes in hostile places.
And the unsung heroes, really.
Indeed. And the Foreign Service and the clandestine service, they do this without recognition, without getting rich. So if we're going to have this movie come out around a time that event like this happens, at least it's one that is really in praise of these folks and their sacrifice.
Now, obviously, the hostage crisis was a pretty pivotal moment in Iran-US relations. We're potentially about to reach another very pivotal moment. Post-US elections, there's a lot of speculation about an attack on Iran. Is that something in a second-term Obama presidency, for example, that you could find yourself supporting?
There are very few Americans, I think, statistically, that are interested in another war. I think that's the defining political current of the day, You know, we've been through 2 wars. A lot of people have died, and it's been very exhausting. So you have no appetite really for, I don't think, for a fight. By the same token, you know, very few people think that it's a good idea for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So the question is, what does one do?
And if there's definitive proof that they've got a nuclear weapon, would you at that point be prepared to say, despite the fact you had reservations about Iraq, you would back a...
I think there's so many steps to get across before you get to that point. They're not going to leap from where we are now, where the, you know, to that point. Which is what raises these questions of drawing a line in the sand. Is this going to be a public red line? Is this going to be a red line that we have privately? I obviously don't support the obtaining of a weapon by Iran. I don't think that's a good idea for anyone. I think it could spark an arms race in the Middle East, and I think it puts some of their neighbors in jeopardy in ways that we don't want to see. But I think there are, in some ways, you know, there are peaceful and diplomatic solutions yet to be tried, and which could be successful.
The presidential debates last night, I don't know whether you had a chance to catch up with any of them.
Presidential debates were 3 in the morning. 3 in the morning I was asleep, but I heard it was quite interesting. I heard there was quite a lot of, you know, mano-a-mano exchanges.
A ballsy performance from Barack Obama, I think.
Can you say that on television? I like that. Yes, that's what I'm told. I'm told there was sort of a tough performance from both, that Obama recovered from what had been described as a listless performance in the past, and that they really went at one another. I don't know. What did you think?
Oh, again, you know, middle of the night, and you know, I've been watching your film, so I haven't had a chance to catch up.
Oh, good. So we're both just talking about what we heard about the debate. It could be completely different.
But are you surprised by that listlessness? You know, as an Obama supporter, are you surprised that he hasn't had more guts?
Well, evidently, this performance last night was really, you know, powerful, and I'd be able to comment on it if I had seen it. I think, you know, these political campaigns are long. There's an ebb and flow to them. There's a tendency to, you know, read into all sorts of little things that take place because, you know, there's more time to cover it than there are events to cover. But I think that it's healthy and good for the country to have a vigorous debate. I happen to be an Obama supporter. I'll vote for Barack Obama. And I'm not concerned that he's listless.
I was struck this morning the Washington Post described him as a disappointing but progressing president. Why has he disappointed you?
No, I don't feel disappointed. I'm somebody who views politics practically, you know, and the world. And you don't just elect a president who then exists in a vacuum and decides which buttons to turn to magically make things happen. You know, one exists in the context of the political realities of one's country. I think he's a smart and passionate guy. You know, you can find an editorial in any newspaper in America, you know, you can find editorials that tell you completely contradicting things. It's part of the nature of the political class. That's what's fun about it.
But if you're not disappointed, are you frustrated that it hasn't been a sort of easier, you know, progression towards the second term?
I wouldn't expect an easy progression to a second term given the nature of the economic situation in the United States. I mean, you know, and certainly I'm aware that, you know, all over Europe people are struggling as well. But, you know, when you have unemployment as high as it is, and when you have the real estate market still sort of stuck in a very bad place, and you have underemployment the way that it is, that's a very hard situation for an incumbent to overcome. And I think he's frankly done an admirable job, you know, given those realities. And naturally, his opponent has tried to capitalize on that, and it's what people expected the debates to be about, and they have been. And I'm not a professional pundit, and my hope is that he'll be reelected, and I think he's in good position.
And if he is reelected and he does have to back a strike on Iran, would you still stick with him?
That's a very hard question to answer because it's such a big thing, and it's such a big hypothetical. Well,
it's not as hypothetical, is it? Because, I mean, people are talking about plans being laid for a January attack. Israel's jumping at the bit.
Yeah, I mean, what we're told, and we don't know because we're not privy to this sort of thing, is that Israel needs additional support from the United States militarily in order to launch an attack that's sufficiently devastating so as to cripple the nuclear capability of Iran. I don't know that that's true. If it is, it's probably a good thing because it means that, you know, governments would have to work together, and there might be more caution involved in that. And I am not somebody who is comfortable just saying, well, you know, given this or that, I would back an attack. I would have to like get to a point where I see that sort of evidence, because it's a very serious thing, you know, and one wants to take it quite seriously, and one wants to be judicious about these sorts of things.
Just finally, you've spoken out against rape in war zones. This
Indeed.
is something that our Foreign Secretary has called for a global campaign on. Are you disappointed that governments haven't got together and tackled this so far?
Yeah, I think it is disappointing that it hasn't been a higher priority. Though, if you look at, you know, particular instances of, you know, Hillary Clinton has addressed it. You know, Barack Obama, in fact, the one piece of legislation that he sponsored when he was in the Senate was around Congo, where a lot of this gender-based violence has taken place. There are individual and sort of one-off responses to this kind of atrocities, because when one's confronted with them, you know, it's like you think, gosh, this is completely unacceptable. This is horrible. What there hasn't been is a more cohesive effort, and it's just it's the nature of, you know, being you know, there's no interest group around women that live in, you know, extremely poor areas in the developing world, you know, and so there aren't enough advocates.
That's an international shame, isn't it?
Indeed, it's a shame that more isn't being done, which is why I've tried to spend as much time as I can in Eastern Congo, and to highlight some of these abuses, and to talk about what can be done. It's very thorny, in particular, say in Congo, where it's not just, again, you can't sort of wave a magic wand. You have you really have a part of the world that doesn't have a stable security sector. There's no army really that functions to protect the people, and there's no functioning judicial process where people can seek redress for wrongs, like having been raped. So, you know, it's kind of counterintuitive to say, well, what do you do to prevent this gender-based violence? Well, you get a better army. And yet that's the nature of what needs to be done, and that requires a huge level of investment and work. And, you know, there are naturally a lot of disincentives, particularly at a time where it's not particularly politically palatable to make investments in foreign countries, particularly ones that aren't viewed as having a strategic relationship with ours. You know, foreign aid has become increasingly unpopular in the United States because people have this sense that, really, people have this sense that, well, why aren't we spending money on ourselves? People also have a wildly disproportionate idea of what we spend on foreign aid. We spend less than 1% of our budget on foreign aid, and people will say things like 10 or 15%. You know, that being said, it's a very difficult time to, you know, for aid, for philanthropy, for working outside our borders to assist our less fortunate neighbors.
Ben Affleck, thank you very much.